sometimes by good or bad fortune, perhaps a bit of both, a cluster of stories will align that have a similar theme or a similar point that can be made with them. It's already happened once this week with the Stormy Daniels affair, the British censorship and so on, and it's happened again today with 3 stories that all kind of link together. They're all part of the same ongoing culture war in the nerdosphere, and the defensive side, the social justice warrior side, simply doesn't understand the people that they're opposing and tends to put words into their mouths and attitudes into their heads that aren't necessarily there. It's all very Kathy Newman, so what you're saying is, when it isn't. But there's very little opportunity for rebuttal. So, in the spirit of fostering understanding, let's dig into these stories. Mike Mearles of D&D fame, current sort of lead developer-ish on 5th edition D&D, chose the last couple of days to go on a sort of assault on D&D fans, which is never really a good idea to attack your primary audience in such a way, especially when you make presumptions about them that they are sexist or whatever else it might be. In this case, yeah, sexist. So, what did he say? Funny how many of the same fans who insist on gatekeeping via rules complexity and lore density also have a problem with women in tabletop gaming. Hey guys, you're all fired from D&D. Find another game. Hopefully, needless to say, this is an obvious misdiagnosis of the problem and of people's objections. I don't think there's a nerdy guy on Earth who doesn't want more women to be into his hobby. But they want them to be into his hobby. They don't want to shift and change and alter the thing that they love out of all recognition in the vain hope of getting more people of one kind or another into whatever it is that they're into. And commercially, as Marvel has discovered to their detriment, when you chase a tiny minority that is unlikely to ever be the largest part of your audience just through the nature of your media and the culture as it exists, not even within that media, you run the risk of losing your core audience and fucking your business in the ass. What people object to is not women in gaming, it's the pandering, it's the forced changes, the forced diversity. It's not diversity either, it's the clumsiness with which it has gone about. It's what I constantly and consistently call the Christian rock problem. Why are Christian rock and metal bands so fucking terrible? It's because they're fixated upon the message and not making good music. And that's what seems to be happening constantly in all of these media. Everyone's so desperately trying to be hyper PC and right on that they forget that the story or the game or the art or whatever else it is has to come first. Diversity and inclusion is something that role-playing gaming always had anyway. It was always remarkably welcoming to people, and just through sheer enthusiasm. Gamers are very evangelical. They want to bring people into their games, but they don't want to do it at the expense of the core of the game. And the rules thing and the lore thing, again, that's mostly going to be enthusiasm. Wanting people to be into what you're into, not wanting to bend the trajectory of what you're into to suit others. And that kind of takes us on to the next story. Malin, or Malin, is an artist for Marvel, and as we all know, Marvel has been tanking due to pandering to the more extreme end of the social justice-y type market, and that's a very generous way to put it. A whole swathe of titles have recently been cancelled, but the whole toxic atmosphere around it and around fighting back against it has just made things worse in that fandom overall. And Malin chose to speak out about it, not perhaps in the best or most delicate way, at least on Twitter, but that's Twitter for you. But there is a longer interview about it, which, if I remember, I will link down below. Or you can web search and you'll find it. But, okay, so what did he say on Twitter? When challenged that the X-Men were social justice warriors, he answered, "The X-Men are closer to Jews in social justice warrior Hitler's Germany, fighting for freedom because they see ideologues rising, silencing them, weaponizing hate, racism and socialism against the people they claim are the root of social ills. SJWs are not Nazis, but Nazis are SJWs, and X-Men aren't SJWs." There's a bunch there that's inaccurate, wrong, or unfortunate. It's always unfortunate to compare Nazis to anyone, and the Nazis were in no way whatsoever socialist, despite calling themselves that. But never mind. He's right in the spirit of what he's saying, even if he put it incredibly poorly and made some bad comparisons. Social justice warriors do have many of the tactics and underlying issues that various other extremist and intolerant movements have had. They are extremely racist, extremely sexist. They do weaponize that. They do use nasty tactics, which he went on to talk about, in order to try and violently silence people. They do try to ban things and effectively, or even literally, burn books and so on. And yeah, he's right. The X-Men are not social justice warriors. They were fighting for equality. They wanted to be treated the same as anyone else. They wanted to be treated as human. And the whole thing was an allegory for the civil rights struggle. Allegory seems to be something that people writing these kind of books and addressing these kind of issues have just completely tossed out the window, despite the fact that it's a much better tactic than beating people repeatedly over the head with propaganda. Learn how to allegory. It works. The X-Men are beloved. This new crop of stuff you've done, nobody likes. So learn how to do that. So he's right in the spirit of what he's saying and why there have been all of these problems. So what was the response to this? A bunch of people calling for him to be fired and silenced and censored, thereby proving his point far better than anything he actually said, which was clumsy, inarticulate, inaccurate, and wrong in detail, but not in spirit, as you have all proven. Well done. As some of you will know, I used to play a lot of Vampire LARP over a span of about 10 years. And I'm still in touch with a lot of people who are involved in the big Vampire fan society that did a lot of this live-action roleplay and organised it globally. And so occasionally I see people I used to know who still do it complaining about or talking about things that are going on within that club. Now, I left because the bureaucracy became rampant and overtook the emphasis on story, because there was continual interference in story and a lot of gatekeeping by people desperately trying to justify the official positions on the storytelling or the out-of-character organisational side, desperately trying to justify those positions that they'd been given. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where it was essentially unendurable and so weighed down with paperwork it wasn't worth doing. But yeah, occasionally I see stuff like this come across my feed, and what this is that they have now banned you playing a character who is a bigot about anything in real life. So say you're playing a vampire who was embraced in the south of America at the height of slavery. You are not allowed to retain any prejudice or bias such a character might have against black people, for example. You're not allowed to play a character who used to be a Nazi, despite that being a great wellspring of potential material. You're not allowed to play a character with outdated sexist attitudes who might look down on women. The divide between reality and fantasy seems to have entirely broken down, not in the players' minds per se, but in the people who feel that they ought to be telling players what to do. This isn't the first time this has come up. It's hardly novel. I mean, we've seen when writers like George R.R. Martin write something nasty in their books, people assume that he is somehow condoning it or perpetuating rape culture by having a character be raped or a villain act like a villain. But it's another example of this creep, of this tearing down of the wall between reality and fantasy that we always used to muscularly assert, and which psychological studies showed that gamers were much better at telling the difference. And now it seems that this whole attitude that somehow what you enjoy in fantasy reflects what you believe in reality is just, it's all torn down, it's all taken away, and anything you do is taken as a damnation of you rather than a portrayal of a character. And all of this under the bailiwick of supposedly creating a more welcoming atmosphere for minorities and so on. To me, it seems far more insulting that you would whitewash history and not be able to represent these attitudes in beings that are supposed to be immortal and calcified and ancient and stuck in their ways and horrific and villainous. That seems far more insulting and far more damaging to the game than having a racist, sexist or otherwise bigoted character. What are they even doing? Every time something like this comes up, I'm more glad I left. Zang.